Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams
Still got it
come
backwards.
true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, coming at you live this Wednesday from the shores of Lake Granbury. Look over my shoulder. There it is right there. Hanging out this week. We just closed on our home out in Pecan Plantation. Getting ready to start remodeling that thing and get it rolling. And pretty excited about it. Had a pretty fun day today. I got to run up to Wichita Falls and take a look at a pond, a long-time Pond Boss subscriber, and done a lot of business with him over the years, and just got to go help him out and let him learn. He knows a lot more than he thinks he knows. I just kind of helped tie a bow around it. But you guys know the drill. For everybody that's been watching this show for quite a while, you know the thing. Click like, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section, and share to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat, which is backwards. There, now it's not. And a Pond Boss mug, which I don't have one in my truck. That knows how to, say it with me, Jacob West, if you're watching, how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. And by golly, there's a Pond Boss magazine right there. So you guys know what to do. And let me kind of go back here. I see a whole bunch of folks checking in. Aaron Gilbert, I see Aaron. I'm going to have to do the questions on my phone this time. So we'll see how that works out. If I miss one, I'll come back and answer it later. Caleb Warrington, haven't seen you before. Glad you're here. I see Indiana, John Elmer, Michael Harrelson from up along the Red River near Lindsay, Texas. John Funk, Mid-Michigan. Kenny Sanderson up there in north of western Kansas. Good to see you, Kenny. DeAndre Kimbrough checking in. JP Clayton, Tony Sutton, Kim Moore. Hey, Kim, Illinois. We got pretty good representation here. Jeremy Holland from Atlanta, Georgia. Jason Rothamel, Pennsylvania. Travis Paul Smith, I bet he's hanging out in Mississippi or an exotic spot somewhere. Frank James from Louisiana. Let's see here. Aaron Gilbert. Yep, Mike Cottrell from Palapena County. Let's see who else we got. Mark Dyer checking in from Nebraska. What we got? You guys are coming in from all over the place. That's very cool. So let's tackle some questions, but while we're waiting on questions, I want to just kind of take you through what's been going on. Look out, Kendall Brown says, look out, Bob. JP Clayton, good to see you. So today I drove up from Granbury to Wichita Falls. Let me back up and tell you a little bit about this, though. Debbie and I have found our home. We bought it. We closed on it. Now it's time to turn it into her touch. So that's going to take a couple of months. The trades are all behind pretty much, so we're going to figure it out. Travis felt like a date that got stood up. Well, he showed back up. So here we go. Let's go have a little fun. Feed some fish. I know that's what you're doing. You're feeding your fish. John Henry in attendance. Tom Blasdell. So anyway, Debbie's going to put her touch on it, which I wouldn't expect anything less or more. So we met with our pool guy. Debbie wants it. One of the conditions was she wants a pool. Our place is right on the river. The Brazos River in Pecan Plantation, downstream from Lake Granbury, which Lake Granbury is right there over my shoulder. There's Carrie Weeks. Good to see Carrie checking in. So anyway, I want to figure out how to broadcast from a deer stand or a table or a boat from in the river. I'm going to figure that out, but right now we don't have a strong enough cell, so we're going to have to get internet down there and figure all that out. Mike Brutterly, Tony Bennett, East of Atlanta, future pond owner, loves Pond Boss. That's great. Good to see you. If you need some help, just email me, message me, something like that. I'll get around to answering it. Glad you're here. Glad you're on board. So anyway, Troy Earhart, he just found out about this broadcast. I think he's listening to it while he's driving back to Burleson, Texas. He's the guy that's going to build Debbie's dream swimming pool out in the backyard with an infinity look to the river. So that's going to be really fun. And we got our running buddy, Chuck Somerville, up there along the Red River. He's got my sawmill cutting cedar, making boards for us now, which Debbie's going to pull out a bunch of the base boards and some of the trim and stuff and replace it and give it her touch in that house. And we're pretty excited. So what I got to do today is going to be pretty helpful to you, I got a feeling. I met with a longtime Pond Boss subscriber. He lives on some acreage just southwest of Lake Wichita. which is near Wichita Falls, Texas. He's got a good source of water that comes into 2 small ponds, and he's, over the past 36 years, he's built his homestead, added on, done projects, gardens. He's got a pool, a lot of grandkids now, and he loves for them to be able to come out and catch fish in his half-acre pond. So he emailed me and texted me a few weeks ago and said, hey, I'm not sure my water's as good as it can be. I'd like to figure out what we can do to make it better. So the first thing I had him do was send a couple of water samples in to the Texas A&M Aquaculture Diagnostics Laboratory. Now, I wanted them to be looking for not only water chemistry, but are there any things living in the water that he needs to be concerned about, like blue-green algae or planktonic algae, or were there anything in that water in that small pond up in Wichita County, or he's actually in Archer County, that he should be concerned about? Well, his water tests came back. They were just beautiful water. So when I got there this morning about, 10 o'clock, we stepped out on the dock, and the first thing I saw was a beautiful, beautiful bloom. Exactly like what a fish hatchery would want. The water was kind of an olive color. You could see a few chunks in it that looked like it might be planktonic algae, but for the most part, it wasn't. It wasn't. Let's see here. Caleb Warrington, I see something funny here. Danny Mac's checking in. Let me see what else we got here. Just got in from a little bar after a haircut. Okay, Danny Mac, you're trimming off the wings. I know how that works. I did that the other day. David Hoskins, Nick Allen. Let's see, Aaron, if you need the best deer blind to broadcast from at your place in Pecan Plantation, check us out in Weatherford. I'm the owner of Tank Blinds, and I'll hook you up. You know what? I like that idea. I came through Weatherford today, from Granbury to Weatherford up to, from there up to Jacksboro, Windthorst, on up to Wichita Falls. So anyway, when I got there, the first thing we started talking about was his water, and that's the first thing I'd be talking to you about is your water. And I told him, we got to be sure his water's happy. Well, the water chemistry and the water biology came back outstanding. So his water was good, happy, clean water. And he's got an aeration system, a bottom diffused aeration system with 2 diffusers. And they're moving water gently, silently, not real boisterous, not boiling. But it's probably enough to turn that pond over once a day, which is plenty in my opinion. So what I told him going into the summer, and I want you guys to listen to this as well, one of the things I want you to do is to be checking your water temperature. Now, for those of you that have an aeration system, one thing you got to know is the aeration system does a great job to allow the water to cleanse itself. Now, aeration system to me is kind of a misnomer from what I've been studying over the years. And what a bottom diffused aeration system does, it doesn't really aerate the water. It causes the water to move vertically from the bottom or where the diffuser is up to the surface, and then it boils that water up gently and allows it to communicate with the atmosphere, where that water can release its byproducts of decomposition. So when there's organic matter, dying algae, fish waste, grass clippings, leaves, whatever that's breaking down in that water, the water is the medium that allows all that stuff biologically to break down, release its nutrients, and to re-employ into the water and be used again, in a more healthy way than it might. In other words, if all that stuff's laying on the bottom, then a rooted aquatic plant mass can spring up, and you might not want that. So what that water's doing with the aeration system is it's pushing that water to the surface. Now, when water is the medium and allows organic matter to break down, it gives off gases. As a matter of fact, when I walked up on David's pond, David Kimball's his name, when I walked up on his pond this morning, the first thing I noticed was just a kind of a faint, real gentle, musty smell, kind of like a cross between damp grass clippings and a fresh rain. So if you can put those two smells together, that's what it smelled like. And I asked him if he noticed that. He said, yeah, I do. I said, that is your aeration system and allowing the water to hit the top and relieve itself of the gases that it doesn't need to store. Because if those gases were to collect and not be able to hit the atmosphere and dissipate and go become something else, then what would happen, then that water would become stagnant. It would turn toxic over a period of time. And that's one of the causes for a fish kill. So we could actually smell his aeration system doing its job. Now, a lot of times when I come up on a pond and aeration system's really boiling, it's doing too much of a good job because you don't smell anything like that. And if it's breaking that stuff down too fast, it's probably also changing the temperature of the water. Now, here's where I was going to go a while ago. Let me make sure we don't have any more questions coming up. Ooh, I'm missing a bunch. Let's see here. See Ron May, David Paulson, Kurt Kruger checking in from Missouri, Tom Blasdale, Ron May. Looks like some of y'all are falling off and coming back on. Let me make sure I'm going the right way here. And I'm going to continue that thought. Yep, I'm going the right way. Okay, so anyway, one of the things that you need to know about water, I think, and what I asked David to do, and I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. If your ponds are real important to you and you want to minimize the risk of a fish kill, hey, John Wilson, good to see you, brother. How's everything going on? Is there a baseball game in Cleveland tonight? If there is, I know where you are. So what's going on is I want you to check the temperature. Check it in 3-foot increments twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. Check it at the surface, 3 feet down, 6 feet down, 9 feet down, all the way to the bottom. You can do it right off the end of the dock. Do it from a boat, same time each day. And what I told David to be careful about is we don't want his water temperature with the aeration system is likely to be autonomous from the top to the bottom. As long as that temperature is within the peak capacity that your game fish like, then you're fine. Let me tell you what that is. With largemouth bass, it's somewhere between, say, 62 degrees and 83 degrees. If it's much hotter than 83 degrees, that's stressful for the fish. If it's any lower than about 55, it's unnecessary. So you want to pay attention to the temperature. And one thing I've learned with a little bit of hard experience a few years ago is I had a good client northwest of Fort Worth who built a 10-acre lake. He called one of the aeration companies. They designed one for him. A company installed it, and he liked it so much, he ordered a second one. He's one of those guys, if one's enough, two's better. So he installed those systems. We stocked some fish. About 3 years later, he started calling me saying, hey, I got a couple of fish dying every day. And they were his biggest, best bass. Well, come to find out, I had him start checking the temperature top to bottom of that lake, and the deepest place is 10 feet deep. That water was 87 degrees top to bottom. So I said, okay, let's do this. Turn off one of your aeration systems and let's see if that makes a difference. It made a little difference. Temperature was 86. So I said, okay, now let's take that one remaining system, put it on a timer, and run it from 9 at night till 9 in the morning during the coolest hours. Because what was going on that I thought was when with so much water coming to the top 24 hours a day, it was becoming the ambient temperature of the average daily temperature. And in that case, in July or August, whenever that was, it was getting too hot. So when he started running his aeration system from 9 at night till 9 in the morning, the temperature went down to 82 degrees and his fish quit dying. So that was pretty darn cool. Forgive the pun. Well, so what I was telling David today is start paying attention to your temperature. And you're in Wichita Falls, Texas, notorious for hot, dry summers. Pay attention to your temperature, and if it gets above about 83, put your aeration system on a timer. And he thought that was a good idea, so he's going to do that. So we talked about water for quite a while. Let me see here. Greg Russell, Aaron Gilbert, Drew Trevino. Have a small pond in Alice, Texas, stocked 3 months ago. Fish are growing, but don't see any forage. When should I restock forage? Have a small pond in Alice, Texas, stocked 3 months ago. Okay, I'm going to presume when you say it was stocked that you added bass. The best way to stock a new pond is to start the forage fish, and in your case, be fathead minnows, bluegill, red ear sunfish. Give them a good advance head start. Promote their growth and reproduction because you want them to build up. Now, this is part of what I told David today. David says, I've got some bluegills, but as you can see, my pond is surrounded about 2/3 of the way with cattails, and I'm afraid those cattails have grown up in some of the places my bluegills used to love to spawn. So I said, you know what? I'm sure you got somebody around here that's a good operator that's got a backhoe. Let your pond drop 2 feet, and then bring in a backhoe with a really talented, artistic operator and dig those cattails up from the roots and go haul them to your burn pile, let them dry up, and burn them later when it's safe. And then have him, while that water's down, create a little shelf and put 4 to 8 inches of pea gravel on top of that shelf. Then you can revive your spawning beds for bluegills. Now, bluegills spawn in colonies. They make a little crater nest about that big around, or maybe a little bit bigger when the fish are bigger. But what happens is they spawn in those craters in North Texas like that. They'll spawn 4 times a year. And then I hit him with this. I said, you know, with your plankton bloom like you've got now, that plankton bloom feeds the newly hatched bait fish or even little bass. Because when a bait fish or a bass is first hatched, take a bluegill for example, when they're first hatched, all you can see is what used to be the yolk of the egg, a little tail, and 2 little bitty dark eyes. When that fish absorbs that yolk, it's hungry. It's got to eat. Its mouth is so small that it's got to glean its food from the water column. So with his plankton bloom, he's primed and ready to have a really good food chain for those newly hatched fish to eat. And then I said, you know, when those are first hatched, they weigh about 12,000 per pound. So if you can keep them alive for 45 days, they weigh 30 per pound. That's significant. It's going to take 10 pounds of plankton and tiny insects for those bluegill mass to gain a pound. 10 pounds of that plankton. Then it's going to take 10 pounds of small insects and tiny fish for the next size fish to gain a pound. Then when they get big enough, if you can keep them alive to where they're 3 inches long, then that's going to feed your game fish. It takes 10 pounds of bait fish at that trophic level to gain a pound. So now you can see 2 reasons why you want that good plankton bloom that you've got going now. Is you want it to shade sunlight off the bottom to keep aquatic plants from becoming a nuisance. But even better yet, in a small pond like that, you want to grow as many bait fish as you can with a plankton bloom. And you get better survival rates. So he saw it as food chain significance and keeping the sun off the bottom significance so aquatic plants don't grow. Now, he did have a ring around this house side of his pond where he's got about a 2-foot swath of floating dead filamentous algae, and he's got some American pondweed and a plant that he'd never seen that's just getting a foothold, duckweed. And I showed him that duckweed. He didn't realize that was a plant. So that's when I laid the question out there. You know, anybody ever asked you if you'd rather have $1 million in hand or a penny doubled every day for 30 days? Pick the penny. That's duckweed. Duckweed reproduces every 48 hours, so every 2 days it doubles. So you get 60 days out from one plant, you have 6 million or whatever it is. So I showed him those plants and told him he needed to do something about that before that became a problem. So he's poised with his landscape guys when that stuff blows up in a corner to take a swimming pool net and dip it out because he doesn't really want to use any herbicides. Now, he's a little bit worried about his food chain, so I suggested to him it's a little bit late in the year, but I think it'd be a good idea to stock some tilapia in there and get some adults so when they start having babies immediately, they can start nibbling on that algae and get your algae under control. Now, if you want to use an aquatic, algicide, that's fine. But I think for long-term control, use some of that tilapia to let them eat it. So we talked about happy water, then we talked about habitat. Well, his spawning habitat for bluegill is pretty well gone, so we can surmise that his food chain is not at maximum carrying capacity and not maximum productivity, so his fish can be thriving from it. So we address that, and you add some spawning habitat, remove the cattails. He's going to leave some cattails because they act as a good visual barrier from some places that he and his wife doesn't want to see when they're drinking coffee in the morning every morning. So it's okay to have some cattails, and a little bit of cattails acts as habitat for a small amount of certain size species of fish, depending on how deep the water is where the cattails grow. Now, he's got the ability to raise and lower the pond. It lowers through evaporation, which is another thing I want you to think about. And I'm going to hit you with this concept right now. When you're in an arid part of the country and we get into the summer and you're losing water, your water is dropping, evaporating, and as it evaporates, the only thing that leaves is water. Think about that just a minute. When you've got a pond and you know the top 3 feet of that pond is about the same volume of water as the rest of the pond, which normal ponds, that's the way it is. The top 3 feet is close to the same volume as the rest of the pond. So if the top 3 feet evaporates and your alkalinity is 100 parts per million and it evaporates 3 feet, guess what? Your alkalinity just doubled because that stuff didn't leave, it stayed there. Now it can get to a certain point, it can precipitate and you can see white lines. I mean, look at Lake Mead and you can see that right there. The limestone is precipitated all along those red rocks. Well, the same thing will happen with your pond, but it's a good idea a couple times a year where you have a lot of evaporation to check your water chemistry so you can compare it and see. Because what I told him was, if you're watching that, it's not as the water evaporates that the fish are distressed by it, but what happens when that water evaporates and it leaves those metals and minerals behind, the fish get accustomed to it slowly. But when you get that big rainstorm that flushes fresh water in, then it cuts those values in half, and depending on what it is, that can distress the fish. So sometimes it's a wise idea to pump some of that water out, irrigate with it, send it on down the river, and replace it with fresh water, and dilute those things that are getting a little bit too dense. So that's one little tip that I've learned the hard way over a long time. The next thing we talked about more was the food chain, and he's got even a bigger pond just adjacent to his small pond that's right behind the house. And he says, over the years I've stocked a bunch of bluegill and a handful of bass. He says, you can go over there and catch a bluegill anytime you want to on a fly rod. I said, well, heck, why don't you use that as a nursery pond? And it's one of the fun things with grandkids is you can buy a few brim traps, get those bluegill on feed, get to feeding them some, get them used to eating fish food. Then you can use fish food as bait and you can trap some, and the grandkids can throw them in the back of the mule and in buckets and go over there and stock them in the lake. That's fun too. So he's knowing that he's got to keep paying attention to his water, which he's doing. He's got happy water. He's got a dead oak tree that when they built a cabana out around the pool as one of their yearly projects years ago, they took out a big oak tree. So the pond was empty back then during the drought. So he drugged that tree all, root, ball, trunk, all the limbs, drug it into the bottom of that pond. And he says now he's pretty sure he's got enough lures hung up in it, he can start a bait shop, tackle shop. So what I told him was when he drops the lake down or the pond down 2 or 3 feet, if he can get out there in a boat with a chainsaw, cut off a bunch of those little bitty limbs and you won't hang up so much and they'll still be good fish attractors. Now that tree's been in there 10 years, so a bunch of those little bitty limbs may be gone. But if not, cut some of them off, that are 3 inches in diameter or smaller, and leave some of those big limbs, and it'll be easier to fish it. You can fish it with a jig, wacky worm, you can drop shot, you can throw soft plastics in there and still fish it. Now, the other thing he asked me was, do I really have to keep that tree in there? Well, no, you don't, because it's a half-acre pond, and you can pretty well cast every piece of water from the dock. What the tree does is it gives fish a place they can orient to, ambush from, hide in, and condition to where they're there all the time. If you don't have that in that pond and it's just a big cereal bowl that's open, those fish are going to go anywhere they want to and suspend in summertime, and you won't be able to hit them in the head with a lure and make them bite because you're probably not going to find them. And even if you do, if they're oriented to that tree over there and you can cast to that tree, let your bait fall off a limb and right down in front of their faces, they're going to be more likely to bite in the summertime. So now also keep in mind with that aeration system going on, the water temperature is all pretty much autonomous top to bottom, which means that in the summertime, those fish your game fish are probably going to be living right close to the bottom, within 6 to 10 inches to a foot from the bottom. So there's a little tip for that. Let's see now, Drew, I didn't answer your question. Just because you don't see any forage doesn't mean it's not there. I would confirm whether you have it or not. I'll tell you what, if you want to go buy more bluegills, that does no harm. I am seeing several cases around the nation where that hard, deep freeze that we had back in February did eradicate a bunch of fish. Now that, coupled with the fact that you probably get cormorants down there, if you had bluegills going into the wintertime and you were invaded by cormorants and that hard freeze that you had, and you had copper-nosed bluegill, for example, and that pond shallow, odds are that you could have lost some fish. So stocking more forage fish is not a bad thing. It does no harm, just may not be necessary. That's the answer I'm going to give you for that. Danny Mac. Let's see what you got there, Danny Mac. My heating controller from Amazon is currently set for 94 degrees air temp. It cuts off mid-afternoon. I love that. I love that idea. I think you ought to share that. Maybe start selling a few of them. I hope you sell them. Roy Worthy, Loopy Souza, Zach Bollinger's checking in. Good to see him. Dennis Smith. Zach knows the drill. You guys that are just fresh on, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like, share this to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a Pond Boss mug that I don't have in my truck that knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. We don't know how it knows, but it does. Nathan Reisdorf, good to see you. Bill Russell checking in from South Alabama. Nick Allen, we're thinking about a fountain for our silt pond in the main lake. Other than aesthetics, can the fountains benefit the lake by moving water, generating oxygen, etc.? Nick, I'll tell you this. Here's my take on fountains. Most fountains draft about 3 feet deep. That water at 3 feet is typically, this time of year, 85% saturated with oxygen just because it can contact the atmosphere from horizontal movement from waves. The one thing you got to think about with a fountain is the more water you lift up and blow up in the air, the higher your evaporation rate is. So if you're in an area that you're not too worried about evaporation, I'd say look at a fountain as aesthetically appealing. It can do some aeration, but typically it aerates in water that doesn't have to have it. Now, if you have an oxygen depletion or the pond turns over, a fountain's a pretty good tool because then you need to get oxygen at any cost that you can get. So I'm going to tell you this. Look at a fountain primarily as aesthetically appealing, pretty, and, something that you want to have good looks for, but don't count on it to be the most efficient aeration system you can get. There are others that are more efficient than that. There's Jacob West. All right. Danny Mac's talking about Jerry Siebert from Oregon. Good to see him. Let's see what else we got here. Looks like I've tackled. Zach said they just had a grand opening of a state park in Pennsylvania. It's 204 acres. Used to be a great bass and chain pickerel. I love chain pickerel. Lake along the state lakes are just being drained, though. Not enough funds. That's a big problem. I'm working on a little pet project that I hope can help over a long period of time fix that. Bill Russell, Ron May. Looks like the guys are being dumped off and coming right back. Have you ever heard of selling the dirt, Nick says, Nick Moore, to help pay for a 10-acre pond? Yes, I have. Now, here's the catch-22 to that. The dirt has to have more value to the purchaser than it does to you. You got to have somebody that's going to haul it, and most of the time, the most valuable dirt is select fill or sand. And if you're digging sand out of a pond site, you don't want a pond. So I'm working on a project right now in south of Dallas, a hunting and fishing club there, where they got a big old oxbow lake that averages 1.5 feet deep. So they're going through their due diligence and they've got the lake drained because it doesn't have any value now as it is. So they've dropped the lake down, and they've hired some big earth moving folks to come in and figure out the cost to dig out about 40 acres of that lake and get the depth down. And then what's it going to take to do it? Can they do it? Well, the good news is they got in there, and this big earth moving company found that a substantial amount of the dirt that's in the bottom of that lake is select fill, and it's right on the outskirts of Dallas. They're optimistic that they can sell enough dirt out of the bottom of that lake and out of a hole they're going to dig to put silt in, that they could sell that to help significantly offset the cost of renovating that lake. Now, I'm going to tell you that's the exception to the rule. Michael Harrelson's on here. Drew Hayes probably on here. Michael Gray checks in. Those are three of the leading pond builders around the nation. And they'll be the first ones to tell you that most of the time, your dirt does not have a lot of value to somebody else, typically because of the kind of dirt it is and the proximity to the market. You know, when you're driving down an interstate highway and you come over an overpass, and this is all over the nation, especially in the Midwest more than anywhere else, when you go across an overpass on that flat ground, you look off in one of the corners right there at that intersection where the overpass is, you'll see a pond. That's because the company that built the highway excavated the dirt from that spot to build up the mounds it took to create that overpass. And in that case, they're going to buy the dirt from that landowner, but they're going to create a lake for him. You know, so that's proximity. You know, I know that when they built a bridge at Gainesville, Texas, up near where Michael Harrelson lives, Mike Otto was asked to sell some dirt off of some land he's got. But they figured out that the miles to haul it were about 4 miles farther than where they could get it cheaper. So the kind of dirt you've got, is somebody willing to buy it, and proximity to the market is going to answer the question as to whether you can offset some costs. So let's see what else we got going on here. Frank James sold some of his clay to help pay for his lake. Not a big sum. I tell you what people have done, I've seen, is depending on the size of the lake, a 10-acre lake's probably not quite big enough, but I've seen guys sell trees off of it, especially hardwoods that can go to a furniture mill. You know, so there's a little bit of that goes on, but you got to know how to play that game. Hey, it's 7 o'clock already. I want to take a minute and thank our sponsors. Thank you to Purina Mills for sponsoring this show. They've had a little hiccup with their feeds. They're trying to figure it out. And there's several guys watching this show. Kenny Sanders is one of them. But there's been 5 or 6 people let me know that some of the sacks of feed have come with clumps in it, which are clogging up their feeders. And I've gotten 3 calls just in the last week and a half. And guys are blaming the feeder. Well, it's not the feeder, it's the feed. And got a call from one guy up in central Missouri just yesterday telling me that his feeder was getting clogged up with dust. He called it dust. Well, that's fines. So I've called and emailed and let the powers that be at Purina know that they need to be checking the manufacturing of that. But I'm going to tell you this. Anytime there's a hiccup, they're right on it and they get it fixed. And that's part of the reasons I like working with Purina Mills. You know, even though they're a big company, when there's an issue, and it may be something as simple as somebody not cleaning out a bin, you know, when they replace materials as they're bringing in their ingredients to make the different kinds of feeds. You know, so I'm sure they're going to get that figured out. I know they will. Also want to thank Greg Grimes for being a sponsor of this show. Greg with Aquatic Environmental over there in Ball Ground, Georgia. If you guys are in Georgia and you want to talk to somebody about a pond, man, he's good. And Texas Hunter feeders. I love Texas Hunter. I love their feeders. I love the longevity of their feeders. Every once in a while, if you have an issue, which I have on very rare occasions, I'll just send an email, and I mean, they respond right now. You know, and anytime somebody wants to buy a feeder, I order it for them, which I do that quite a bit. If I get that note to Texas Hunter by 2 o'clock, it goes out that day. You know, so they're very responsive and their products are outstanding. So those are the big reasons I love Texas Hunter. David Schneiderman, I don't know if he's here tonight or not. He's Easy Docks of Texas. If you're looking to build a dock, a snap together dock, one that you can configure like you want to, that's a good choice, especially if you have a pond or lake that fluctuates, goes up and down. Great choice. Now, they're not cheap, they're good, and you can build it just exactly like you want it. I mean, I don't know if you priced docks lately, but if you're going to build any kind of a substantial dock, you're going to spend $8,000 to $10,000 or up, depending on what you want with it. So I appreciate the sponsorships of everybody. So let's see here. Let me see what else we got. Mark Dyer, questions on shock survey accuracy. Okay, let me read this all the way through. When you electroshock survey, which appears to be done along the edges of the pond in shallow water, how do you account or figure population numbers for fish that hang out in deeper water like catfish? If it's done in the spring, how do you account for the crappie and bluegill numbers that you may get during their spawn, possibly showing an overrepresentation of their number? That's a great question. Let me hit that for you. First of all, electrofishing is the most widely used sampling tool in the pond management industry. Now, there's other tools. You know, if you think you've got crappie, or you do and you want to figure them out, you can set some experimental gill nets that go down in the deeper water and set those overnight or maybe for a few hours in the evening and then run them. You can do shoreline seine samples to verify reproduction of fish. You can set pike nets to fish that tend to migrate and move. You can catch those in these pike net traps, big cylindrical nets that they'll swim into and get caught like in a trap. There's 6 or 8 other kinds of sampling tools, but here's the direct answer to your question. Electrofishing can only go down 6 feet. So just because you don't sample a species of fish doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Now, that's why I like to be picky about the time of year that I do it based on that lake. If it's a shallow water lake, I'm comfortable doing it during the cooler months and even on into the early part of the summertime. If it's a deeper lake, I want to do it during spring or fall when the fish move shallow to spawn or move shallow to feed heavy, because you're going to be checking the littoral zone, basically, where the majority of the habitat is in most ponds or lakes. So what we do there is you can look at the ratios of the fish that you do catch, and then you can look at the body condition of the fish that you do catch, and you can deduce some things pretty accurately. Like, for example, if we take the sharker boat out and say we capture 100 bass, and 80 of those bass are 10 to 12 inches long and range relative weights are 75 to 85%, which means they're pretty seriously underweight. And 20 of those bass, the other 20 range from 2 pounds up to 2 of them that were over 5 pounds, and their relative weights are high. One thing we can deduce is that there's not a lot of big fish, or there wouldn't be so many little fish because they would eat them. At the same time we look at that, if we look at the ratios of bluegills and we only catch 2 size classes of bluegills, either really big ones or those that were just hatched that are about that big, we know those bait fish are being overeaten by overcrowded bass. So that's something we can do. Now, typically, if there's a significant number of other species of fish and we do it in the springtime, we'll capture a sample. Now, it might not be representative of what's there. I mean, I looked at a lake earlier this spring. We shocked up 2 8-inch crappie, and they were white crappie. So I said, do you ever catch any crappie? And the guy said, you know what, every once in a while we'll catch some, and when we do, we catch a bunch. Well, tell me what that means. Well, we might catch 35 of them in an afternoon, and then they're all gone. Well, that happens about 2 weeks out of the year when they come shallow to spawn. So conversely, even though we may not get them in the shocker boat, if we're running along while they're spawning, we're going to overestimate their numbers. And so in that particular lake, we only shocked up 2, and so I had to rely on additional data by him telling me, yeah, there's times once a year, every other year or so, where we're out there and we'll hammer them. But I know it's in a 2-week window, because that's what happens with crappie unless you target them and you can figure out where they are in July and then go catch some. And he called me about a month after the survey. He says, man, you're not going to believe this. In this 10-acre lake, we caught 135 crappie, 12 to 14 inches long. I said, I believe it, but we only caught 2. I mean, we knew they existed, but it's hard to quantify what that means. Now, one thing that I did do, I noticed with that electrofishing survey, I knew that those overcrowded bass were annihilating the bluegills, but I also knew that there should be a lot more young of the year baby bluegills, which gave me kind of a hint that there's probably quite a few more crappie than what we saw. So when he called me and gave me those numbers, it didn't surprise me. And I wasn't disappointed that we didn't catch them. That's just the way it is. What it is what it is, and that's what you got to do. The fish like catfish, if you'll set up a feeder and start feeding fish, your catfish are going to come to that feed, and you don't have to shock them up. You can see them come and eat that fish food. So there's the best answer I can give you. There's really no sampling tool that's 100% accurate. And I'll tell you this, even if we found one that was 100% accurate today, that fishery is going to be different in a week because fish are reproducing and eating each other. And as long as you got those dynamics, it's really hard to get an accurate count, but you can get a good estimation of what's going on with that population with enough of a data set to make wise decisions. Like in this case, if your targets are growing more bass that are larger, then you need to be calling small bass. If crappie and catfish aren't your target species, target them and take them out. And so I asked him, did you take those 135 crappie out? He said, oh yeah, we cleaned them till 2:30 in the morning. He said, I don't know if I want to eat another crappie fillet for a few days. All right, let's see what else we got here. Nick Moore want to sell dirt. Got you on that. Tom Blasdell. Let's see what he's got. Our Vertex aeration unit has been down since last fall. We got pump rebuild kits and new capacitors and should have it running this week. What will be a good phase-in schedule? I am so glad you asked that. If you were to turn that system on, as a matter of fact, R.E. Thompson watches this show quite a bit. I'm going to talk about R.E. R.E. is an amazing guy. He's in his 80s. He probably fishes 5 days a week. He still mows grass. He counsels at a rehab center. He's a pastor, and I'm not sure he sleeps. Well, I know he's 80, so he's at least got to take a nap every once in a while. Well, anyway, he was telling me about a pond that he took on in, he lives in Petal, Mississippi, but I can't think of where this one is. Anyway, it's about a 5-acre lake where a lady owns it, and her aeration system went down. Or no, I think she bought an aeration system in the middle of the summer, had it installed, turned it on, didn't phase it in. Had a major fish kill. Because what happened was she took a pond that was stratified in the summer, just like yours is right now. If you were to take that stratified pond, you got that warm layer of water sitting on top of a cold layer of water. That top layer of water, Thermocline cold layer of water, that cold layer of water is anoxic. It cannot get oxygen in it because the two sources of oxygen are the atmosphere and aquatic plants. No aquatic plants growing in that deep water under the Thermocline. Ain't going to happen. So what happened with this lake in Purvis, Mississippi, that Mr. Thompson was talking about, is you had this layer of water that's maybe a little bit less volume, but totally anoxic and full of some toxic gases like hydrogen sulfide. When they kicked on that aeration system, it regurgitated, vomited up all that stuff off the bottom, mixed it with the top layer, caused a man-made turnover, and killed the fish. Well, now she's skittish about what to do. She doesn't want to treat algae. She doesn't want to manipulate the fishery. She restocked it with fish, understocked it, because she doesn't know if she had a total fish kill or a partial fish kill. So now she's kind of running skittish about how to use the aeration system, whether to use it, and that was over a year ago. So here's your answer, Tom, is run it for about 30 minutes the first day, get downwind, see if you can smell the smells of the water releasing its gases. See the color of the water change. It'll go from that pretty green you got on top to maybe a black color if it's spitting up some silt, but run it for about 30 minutes that first day, and when you smell those gases, turn it off. Then the second day, run it for twice that time. Run it for an hour. Third day, run it for 2 hours. Double the time until you're running 24/7. Then check your temperature top to bottom. If your temperature is above 83 degrees, put it on a timer. Run it from 9 at night until 9 in the morning. Now, I'm assuming, your Vertex aeration unit, that's going to be a bottom diffused system. And what I just told you is what Vertex manufacturer recommends. J.P. Clayton, Cody Smith, good to see you. David Hoskins, Justin Shank, West Coast, near San Diego. Just now in June, my catfish and sunfish are finally eating feed. That's probably because your temperature's been a little cool. Chad Bowman's checking in over there around Ranger Cisco area. Let's see here. There's Vito. Good to see Vito checking in. Vito, hey, Chad, you and Vito have a conversation. Vito's neighbor contributed a whole bunch of bullheads to his pond. The good news is I can loan Vito my seine, and he can probably catch a bunch of his because it's small enough to do it. Jason Rothamel, Travis Lee, Frank James, Bob, what factors determine the water temperatures below the thermocline? Oh, that's a great question. What factors determine the water temperatures below the thermocline? I tell you what influences it is when the thermocline occurs. So if you get a rapid warm-up in the spring and the water temperature when that warm-up starts is in the 60s, then the water below your thermocline is probably going to be in the low 70s. Now, if the thermocline occurs over a longer period of time because temperatures are gradually going up, then your thermocline, below the thermocline temperature might be 80 down to 75, something like that. So now, those temperatures don't really change as the summer goes on. They stay pretty stable because of the physics of water. You know, cooler water is denser than warmer water to a point. As I've told you guys over and over time, talking about happy water, that's my phrase, happy water. Water is most dense at 39 degrees. As it warms up from that, it's less dense. As it cools from that, it's less dense. That's why ice floats. Ice at 32 degrees is lighter weight than water warmer than 32 degrees, down to 39. So what happens is those temperatures below the thermocline are basically isolated and stabilized and don't change a lot. Now, what can change them is if you get some big winds that generate some circulation, and if the thermocline moves down and then comes back up, then the temperature can be influenced by that, which I've seen that happen in long, narrow lakes where the thermocline's not flat. It's actually sitting at an angle. And then when that wind's really kicking up, the angle changes, then the thermocline will start to level back up, and you can check that temperature, and it might be 1 or 2 degrees warmer. So over time, the main factor about that temperature is when it happens. So if it happens with a rapid rise, you know, and actually the stage was set for that for us, oh gosh, about 5 weeks ago when the temperature got in the 90s, then we had a cold front that shoved the temperature down all across the nation. That completely changed the whole thermocline thing. That's what happened. That's what happened to our buddy up there, Chuck Brinkman. And hey, listen to this. Pond Boss Magazine. I've got a copy of it right here. You just have to read backwards. This is the latest issue. The July-August issue is at the printer. Oh, well, it's not quite at the printer. It's close. And it's going to be going out in the next 10 days. I ran late because we've been moving, which, if I worked for somebody else as the editor of their magazine, I probably would have got fired this issue because I didn't get it done on time. But since I own it, I might fire myself. Well, here's the thing. We got some really good practical content, which we try to do that every issue. But I wrote about Chuck Brinkman's story, got some good photographs that talks about what he went through when his pond turned over about 3 weeks ago. So if you don't subscribe to Pond Boss, you need to. $35 a year. You guys know what I'm going to say next. Cheaper than a Friday night date. Debbie and I just ate right up here at the Mesquite Pit, Granbury, Texas, $44 for supper. And I ate a salad. I guess it might have been the cocktail and her glass of wine that drove it up. But I know this. We spent more money than a 1-year subscription to Pond Boss. $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. So you guys, if you don't subscribe, please do. Go to pondboss.com. There's some links there that'll get you there. One other thing that I know if Chris Blood comes on or Chico comes on, they're going to get on to me. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm not real comfortable doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. We've got some premium content at pondboss.com. It's the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology, 22 videos, probably 15 hours worth of prime content that's directed toward you and helping you minimize the dumb tax. The dumb tax. Now, you know, when I go sit down and talk to somebody, especially somebody that's a first-time landowner that's had property for 4 or 5 years, and I get to their place and we go take a look, we look at all the ponds and lakes, look at the way the land's laid out, where the water comes from, all that. Then we'll go sit down and maybe have a glass of wine or a beer or a glass of tea. And in the fall and the winter, it's around the campfire. They'll almost always start off the conversation, you know, I love this place. I love what we do. Now, I wish I'd have done this a little different. Well, you don't know what you don't know. And the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology helps you see things that you don't know that you don't know. So, and I promise you, it will help you pay the dumb tax. Now, you're going to buy it. You know, if you buy every video, it's $425. But I'm going to tell you this, you will save way more money than that with the knowledge you gain from those videos when you go in and apply them to your property. So please take a look at that. You can click on a link at pondboss.com across the vertical or horizontal menu. There's one called Institute. Or you can go to pondboss.teachable.com and you'll see it. Now there's 6 different modules. They're priced from $79 up. If you buy all of them by themselves, it's like $840. But if you buy them all at one time, it's $425. Now, what we may do, if I'll tell you this, if any of you guys that are watching this tonight, if you want to buy that series, I will give you a 10% discount. Send me an email. I'll have Leanne set it up to where you'll have 5 days to buy it. You'll get a code, and when you input that code, that'll give you a 10% discount. So for $425, take off $42.50, add sales tax, you can buy it. So there's your sales deal for tonight. Let's see if there's any more questions here. Cody Smith, where would you rank freshwater shrimp on the list of supplemental feed for largemouth? Cody, that's a cool question. I've started using those. I've been talking to Jason Luster, who's used them for 5 or 6 years. My number one concern is they're going to get eaten way too fast. Now, I'm talking about freshwater shrimp that are Macrobrachium rosenbergi, the freshwater prawns. That's what I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to set that aside. Freshwater shrimp that are native to ponds and lakes, if you can get some established and you got the right habitat for them, they can establish. They don't get any bigger than that. They're great for bluegill and young bass. But what I'm talking about, what I think the question is where would I rank freshwater shrimp on the list? I would probably give them, I'm going to tell you, bluegill's number 1. Fathead minnows to jumpstart a pond, that's their role. Bluegills are the backbone. Behind bluegills, I'd say red ear sunfish. Behind that, I'd say threadfin shad. Behind that, I'd say it's a toss-up between gizzard shad and tilapia for different reasons. Then right behind that, I'm going to say crawfish. Right behind that, I'm going to say rainbow trout. Right behind that is probably where I would put Macrobrachium rosenbergi. And the only reason I'm putting them there is because I don't know. We just stocked 30,000 of them into a 60-acre lake in Missouri. And we know that they're tropical. We know they're going to die in the fall. But what we don't know is, what's the survival rate going to be? Is the survival rate going to be pretty good? If it is, then at 12 cents a piece, it's pretty good bang for the buck. Now, what the producer's telling me, and Jason Luster, even if there's a 50% survival rate, if those shrimp grow up to become like half a pound or 6 per pound or 12 per pound, in the fall when the temperature starts to drop, early fall, once the temperature gets into the low 60s, they get sluggish. They're open season and the bass gorge themselves. Now I know that, what's that ranch down around Laredo? La Perla, Gary Schwartz. He's used these shrimp for years. Now what he does is he grows them in little hatchery ponds, feeds the heck out of them, and then drains the pond, does that a couple times a year. So he's feeding bigger shrimp to his fish. So I think there's some merit to do some more homework. I grew some myself last year, and I stocked them into a couple of hatchery ponds that were loaded with bluegills or red ears. I was stunned at the survival rates because we went in October and harvested a bunch of them, and we ate some at the last live Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. So I'm cautiously optimistic that they're going to be pretty good to work with. So I think they're worth a try. 12 cents a piece. If you and he can air freight them anywhere in the nation. Now he doesn't want to FedEx them or UPS them because the freight gets way out of hand. But he will bag them up, oxygen bags, ship them like tropical fish. haul them to Southwest Airlines or Delta or somebody and ship them air freight, which means you got to go pick them up at the airport. But you'll save hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of freight. So if anybody's still interested in that, let me know and I'll put you in contact with the producer. Jason Nepstad, I noticed large schools of small gizzard shad. I'm guessing they stop schooling at this level once they get larger. Yeah, they will they'll slow down their schooling, but they'll still school in smaller numbers. And once they get 7 or 8 inches long, they move into the shallows and start feeding in the mud. Frank James, my body of water is maximum depth 25 feet, so a large area in a thermocline. Yes, but if you calculate the volume, it may not be that much. Let's see what else we got here, because I'm about ready to wrap it up. Go find my wife. Travis Lee, I dug a pond in the sand, the top 5 feet, then it was clay. I filled a 3-foot trench around the pond with clay, down to clay. Right now I'm losing 1.5 inches a day if I'm not running a hose in it. I'm wondering how much is due to evaporation versus leakage. That's leakage. To help you quantify that, on a day like today where I'm sitting, it got to be 95 degrees. Humidity was about 30%. When you have 95 degrees and it's 30% humidity, your evaporation rate's going to be slightly more than 1/2 inch every 2 days. Now, the maximum evaporation I have ever watched myself is 1/2 inch a day. So if you're losing 1.5 inches a day, at least 1 inch of that is going to seepage. Donnie Hines, have a pond that has a lot of lily pads in it. I'm wanting to dig it out to 10 feet all the way around. It's about an acre pond. I think that could be a real good idea. What I would do there is let the pond go down a few feet, because when you start digging out lilies now, you don't know if you're getting all the tuber or not. And if you leave any tuber, it's going to grow. Plus, the cuts will be ragged. You still want a good 3-to-1 slope if you can get it. That's a safe slope. I saw a picture on a Facebook page. I think it was Matt Rail's page, day before yesterday. A fawn got in a pond, couldn't get out because it was too steep and the fawn drowned. So I think it's a wise idea to give people and animals an exit strategy. There's Charla Runkle. Good to see her from Norman, Oklahoma. We love Charla. She came to the Bob Lusk Institute last fall. Jeb Kaufman, good to see you. Ken Dowd from Pennsylvania. Paul Lynch. Cody Smith, good to see him again. Donnie Hines, even in Northeast Texas, you recommend to dig out a pond? Yeah, send me an email, info@pondboss.com. I'll get you in touch with a couple of people. Mike Otto, number 1. Let's see here. Chad Bowman gave away 4,000 to 5,000 yards of select topsoil for a free expansion. 9 months of a big ugly mud hole. Has a maximum depth of 4 to 5 feet. The road was not helped either. Put your time frames, expectations, and any requests in writing. Absolute great advice. Totally good advice. Jason Nepstad, I thought it would be slick and purchase Tractor Supply feed. Finally broke down and started buying Purina. Wow, what a difference in the quality. All protein-based pellets are not equal. That's exactly right. Purina, I concur. Okay. See, Frank says, what factors determine the water temperature below? Oh, we already did that one. How did I miss that? Okay, we did that one. See what, Gary Elborn? Good. I see a lot of new names. The job I love, getting groceries from our HEB and consulting on manufacturing trends such as your yogurt closure, pressure or glue is becoming unopenable. Calibrate. Why wouldn't they pay for that? Danny, I want to have some of what you're drinking and the way you're thinking. I like that. All right, I think we're about to wrap up here. Chris Ketchum, I got some serious duckweed going on, so I think it will kill my hydrilla. Here, Chris, when I read those two things, one of the things, I'm going to hit you with this tip, then I got to wrap it up, 7:29. Get a positive identification on the plants. I don't see hydrilla very often at all in private waters. I think in 40 plus years, I've seen it once or twice. I've seen it 2 times. Once in a private lake that people use for public access. The other one in a pond where a guy planted it, which was a mistake. See what else we got. All right. Hey, there's Bruce. Good to see Bruce. Bruce Condello. Terry Dooley. What can I use to kill lily pads and weeds that won't harm my fish? Go to Aquaplant, Texas A&M University's Aquaplant website, and find that plant, and they've got some good choices. That's my go-to nowadays. It will show you your choices. Scott McClure, good to see Scott from Nebraska. I've only been able to control duckweed with propeller. Dickwat dings it, but not enough to eradicate it. Yep, spend a little bit of time on Aquaplant with Texas A&M. You'll get some good tips on how to deal with those plants. Let's see here. Danny Mac, wondering how the bottom silt holds around an aerator. It doesn't. It moves. It does create a silt-free radius. Yes, it does. If the water ain't happy, Mike McPherson says, then nobody's happy. That's an absolute truth. That's a total truth. That comes straight out of the book of Bob. Or the book of something. Holy cow, I got behind. How do I get my pond super black? You can use super black dye. There are black dyes out on the market if that's what you want to do. So there are pond dyes for that. Thanks for the plug, Bruce. Donnie Hines used tilapia. Wow, I got behind, guys. Okay, so Mark Dyer, my electroshock question was based off a concern of too large a biomass of catfish based off of what I see feeding and catching. We catch a bass at 9 at a rate I'd expect for proper balance, but don't see any big bluegills, mostly 3 to 5s and a lot of black and white crappie, all sizes on a 26-acre developed sand pit. Any idea what I could aim for in pounds for catfish reduction? I'm going to keep going for a while since these questions are coming up. They deserve an answer. I'm going to tell you, let's do it this way. If you've got a feeder up and the catfish are eating, catfish can consume 3% of their body weight every day. And from that, they convert that fish food about 2 to 1. So if you feed 100 pounds of catfish food, you're going to get 50 pounds of catfish. And if you're feeding 50 pounds over X amount of days and the catfish are consuming it, but you're not seeing a significant weight gain individually, then you have a lot of fish. You can also expect 10 to 30% of the fish to come to the feeder at any given feeding time. So if you count 60 fish around the feeder, you could pretty well bet there's more than that, 3 times as many in that area. So I don't have a good answer for you other than start trapping some. And if you can get them to come to fish food, then you can trap them in a big trap. If you want to know more information about that, send me an email to info@pondboss.com. In pounds of reduction. The pounds of reduction are going to be relative based on the pounds of production. So if you're producing 500 pounds per acre, you better be getting rid of 200 pounds per acre. If you're producing 50 pounds per acre, you ought to get rid of 20 pounds per acre. Another thing is take the biggest ones out. A 12-pound catfish is going to compete with a 5-pound bass. So they're in it to win it too, because they're channel catfish are top-line predators just like a bass is once they're 2.5, 3 pounds or bigger. So that's my answer for that for now. Aaron, see what Aaron's got here. 2.5-acre pond, far west Oklahoma, north of Hollis, near the Texas Panhandle. 70 foot deep, so you're in the Canadian aquifer. Thinking of running, or you might be in the Ogallala at 70 feet, probably not. Running a 4-inch diameter pipe to the pond, 100 feet from the cabin, help fill it up. The pond is 4 feet low and only comes up 2 feet in the last year because the rain misses you. You're one of the misfortunate ones. It's been hitting everybody else around here. Should you have your well water tested? I think it's wise to do that. I do think it's wise to do that. You need to know the chemistry, but not so much because whether it's toxic or not, because in the aquifers where you are, that water is hearty, healthy, and happy. It's just good to have a baseline to know what it is. So I think we might be getting to the end. Jay Spire, Charlotte, North Carolina, over here. Okay. Only makes the picks. Look forward to the new issue in the Pondology series. All right. Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for the kind words. Jared Moyers, I'm wanting a catfish pond. Any advance between blues and channels? Blues get huge. As in huge, I mean 30 to 50 pounds, even in small waters. Channel cat, 10 to 12 is probably going to top it out, although I've seen them 20. You know, so keep in mind they're both predators. Blue cat are more prolific predators than the channel cat are. You know, if you want giant fish, go with blues. If you want to meat fish, go with channels. 1 acre, 8 feet deep. I'd go with channel catfish if you want meat. You can stock 200 in there, feed them up, hit a pound and a half, 2 pounds, start harvesting some, look at it as a put and take, add more later. That's the way I would handle that. Yep. Travis, thanks for the update on Chris Houston. I got to see Jimmy and Johnny Morris in Fort Worth at the Classic. Jeremy Poole from West Texas. Okay, holy cow, I'm running out of time, running out of room. All right, you know what? Okay, hey guys, looks like you guys are through with the questions. I'm so glad to get to join you again tonight, and I look forward to catching up with you next Wednesday. Not sure where I'll be, but I'll be around here somewhere. You know what? I do know where I'll be. I'll be at Running River Ranch in Brenham, Texas, so I'll probably be broadcasting from my pickup again because we moved the RV to Granbury without internet yet, so I'm working on that. All right, so hey, listen, thanks. Don't forget, subscribe to Pond Boss Magazine. Go to pondboss.com. Check out all the different things we've got. The Institute of Higher Pondology, free discussion forum, a lot of free articles, a lot of free videos. These videos are archived on YouTube when Leanne gets around to it. So we appreciate you guys watching, and until next week, adios.